My name is Mallory, and I am 28 years old. I was standing in my mother's kitchen doorway when I heard the words that shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. My parents, my three siblings, their spouses, even distant cousins I barely spoke to, were all being invited on a luxury beach vacation. Everyone except me. My mother's voice cut through the air like a knife as she said, "It's better this way." I stood there frozen, grocery bags trembling in my hands, wondering what I had done to deserve being erased from my own family. Before I continue this story, I want to know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below because I love connecting with people from all over the world who understand family pain. If you have ever felt invisible to the people who should love you most, hit that like button right now. And if you want to hear how my family discovered the secret I had been hiding for 2 years, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss a single moment of this journey. I had driven 40 minutes from my apartment to my parents' house in suburban Connecticut that afternoon for the simplest reason imaginable. My mother had lent me her casserole dish 3 weeks earlier, and I was finally returning it. I had picked up some groceries on the way, thinking maybe I would stay for dinner if the mood felt right. I had not called ahead because I wanted to surprise them, to show up the way daughters are supposed to show up, unannounced and welcome. But as I approached the side door that led into the kitchen, I heard voices that made me stop dead in my tracks. My father Warren's deep voice carried through the screen door with perfect clarity. The resort confirmed 9 rooms, perfect for everyone. I heard the scratch of a pen on paper, probably my mother's meticulous planning notebook that she used for every family event. My sister Bethany laughed, and the sound was bright and carefree in a way I had not heard directed at me in months. "This will be the best family vacation ever," she said. My brother Pierce chimed in immediately. "Finally, just us and the kids. No complications, no awkwardness." My younger brother Garrett was quieter, and I strained to hear his response, but he said nothing at all. Then my mother Constance spoke, and her words punched the air from my lungs. "I know it seems harsh, but Mallory won't even notice. She's barely been part of this family for 2 years anyway." I pressed my back against the exterior wall, clutching the grocery bags so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Part of me wanted to burst through that door and demand to know what they were talking about. But something stronger held me in place. I needed to hear more. I needed to understand the full scope of what was happening before I confronted them. The conversation continued as if they were discussing nothing more significant than a shopping list. Warren mentioned that the trip was to a luxury resort in Turks and Caicos, and they had been planning it for 3 months. 3 entire months of secret planning, of group chats I was not invited to, of excited phone calls I never received. When my father casually mentioned that the total cost was $32,000, I felt my stomach drop. They were spending that much money on a family vacation that deliberately excluded me. Bethany's voice turned conspiratorial. "Should we tell her at all, or just go?" she asked. My mother's response was measured and cold. "Let's decide after we're already there. No need to deal with the drama before we leave." Garrett finally spoke, and his voice carried the only trace of discomfort I had heard in the entire conversation. "This feels wrong. She's still our sister." I felt a flicker of hope that maybe someone in my family remembered I existed, that someone might defend me. But Pierce shut him down immediately. "After what she's been hiding?" She made her choice. His words confused me completely. What was I hiding? What choice had I made? Constance's voice turned firm and final. "She's pushed us away for 2 years. This is the natural consequence of her actions. We can't keep waiting for her to rejoin the family." I set the grocery bags down silently outside the door, my hands shaking so badly that I could barely control my movements. I retreated to my car on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else, and I drove away without looking back. I made it to a grocery store parking lot 3 miles away before the tears started. I sat in my car for an hour, crying and questioning everything I thought I knew about my place in my own family. What had I done? What were they talking about? The questions circled in my mind like vultures, and I had no answers for any of them. The truth was that my life had become something almost unrecognizable over the past 2 years, though my family only saw the surface of my isolation. I lived alone in a small apartment 40 minutes from my parents' house, a distance that had once felt like healthy independence but now felt like exile. My job as a medical transcriptionist allowed me to work remotely, and the solitary nature of the work suited my current circumstances perfectly. I worked night shifts mostly, transcribing medical records in the dark hours when the rest of the world was sleeping, which meant my schedule rarely aligned with anyone else's. My apartment reflected the temporary feeling that had settled over my entire existence. The walls were bare, except for a single calendar with dates circled in red marker that I tried not to think about. My refrigerator held almost nothing except meal replacement shakes and leftover takeout containers from days when I had the energy to order food. The curtains stayed drawn most of the time because the sunlight felt too bright, too demanding, too much like the outside world I had been avoiding. I woke up at 11 in the morning on most days, and I counted that as an accomplishment when other days saw me barely able to lift my head from the pillow until afternoon. The loneliness was something I had learned to manage through careful routines and deliberate avoidance. I scrolled through old family photos on my phone sometimes, looking at images from holidays and birthdays when I had been present, and smiling and apparently welcome. I had muted the notifications from the family group chat months ago because the constant updates about events I was missing or conversations I was not part of hurt too much to watch in real time. Garrett had texted me separately several times over the past few months, simple messages asking if I was okay or if I wanted to get coffee sometime. I had answered with brief reassurances and vague excuses until eventually the texts became less frequent. The voice in my head was constant and insistent. They are better off without knowing. You would only burden them with problems they cannot fix. You would only become the family tragedy, the cautionary tale, the daughter who ruined everything by getting sick. I repeated these thoughts to myself like a mantra, convincing myself that my isolation was a gift I was giving to the people I loved. I was protecting them from something they were not equipped to handle. My phone rang one afternoon, and I almost did not answer when I saw Bethany's name on the screen, but some residual sense of family obligation made me pick up. Her voice was fake, cheerful in the way that people sound when they are fishing for information. "Hey, stranger, how are you?" I matched her tone with my own performance. "I'm fine. Just busy with work." She laughed, but there was an edge to it. "You're always busy. Too busy for Mom's birthday dinner, too busy for Easter, too busy for literally everything involving your family." I felt my defenses rise immediately. "I've had a lot going on." The silence on her end was pointed. "You seem different lately. Everything okay?" I deflected as I had learned to do. "Just work stress. Nothing serious." The call ended with a coldness that lingered long after I hung up. I stood in my bathroom later that night, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The person looking back at me was barely recognizable as the woman I had been 2 years ago. I was thinner, paler, with shadows under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. I pushed up my sleeve and looked at the faint scar on my wrist where a hospital bracelet had rubbed during a 3-week stay that no one in my family knew about. I covered it quickly, a reflex born from months of hiding. I opened the medicine cabinet and took out the pill bottle that had become the center of my daily routine, swallowing the medication with practiced efficiency before returning the bottle to its hiding place. My calendar caught my eye as I walked past it. The circled date for my next medical appointment was just a week away. But now, knowing that my family would be on their vacation during that time, I grabbed a pen and crossed it out. I would reschedule for after they returned. At least I would not be interrupting their perfect trip with my inconvenient existence. I laughed bitterly at the thought. "At least I won't interrupt their perfect trip," I said out loud to my empty apartment. The silence that answered was the only response I had grown to expect. 3 days after I overheard my family planning their vacation without me, I came home from a rare grocery shopping trip to find an ambush waiting outside my apartment door. Bethany was pacing on the walkway, her arms crossed and her expression thunderous. Pierce leaned against the railing with the aggressive posture of someone spoiling for a fight, and Garrett sat on the steps, looking uncomfortable and guilty in equal measure. His truck was parked next to their cars, and I realized with a sinking feeling that this had been coordinated. They had come together to confront me about something. Pierce pushed off from the railing as I approached with my grocery bags. "We need to talk, now." His voice left no room for negotiation. Bethany stopped pacing and turned to face me, her eyes red as if she had been crying. "You've been lying to us for 2 years, Mallory. 2 years." I felt my heart start to race as I fumbled with my keys, trying to buy time to understand what was happening. Lying about what? I don't know what you're talking about. Pierce stepped closer, his finger pointing at my chest. Don't play dumb. We know you quit your job 8 months ago. Garrett spoke quietly from his spot on the steps. We hired someone to check on you. A private investigator. The words hit me like a physical blow. They had hired someone to spy on me. My own siblings had paid money to have my life investigated, rather than simply asking me what was wrong. Bethany's voice rose higher. You're not working. So, where's your money coming from? Are you in trouble? Drugs? Gambling? She listed her accusations like items on a charge sheet. We've been putting the pieces together for months. The inconsistent stories, the weight loss, the isolation, the secrecy. You're hiding something serious, and we deserve to know what it is. Pierce nodded in agreement. We thought you were just being distant. But this is something else. This is calculated deception. I tried to defend myself with the lies I had prepared for exactly this moment. I'm freelancing now. The income is unstable, but I'm managing. Bethany rolled her eyes. Freelancing is what? You haven't posted anything on your professional profiles in over a year. Pierce added, no tax records for self-employment either. Our investigator was thorough. I changed tactics. I'm fine. Just stressed. Can we not do this right now? But the more I deflected, the angrier they became. Garrett remained silent, looking more and more miserable as his siblings attacked. Pierce's ultimatum came suddenly and brutally. If you don't tell us the truth right now, we're done. I mean it. I have 3 kids who ask about their aunt, and am tired of making excuses for why you're never around. Bethany nodded emphatically. We can't keep caring about someone who won't let us in. It's exhausting, Mallory. Do you understand how exhausting it is to love someone who keeps pushing you away? Garrett tried to intervene. Maybe we should give her some space to think about this. Pierce turned on him immediately. We've given her 2 years of space. Look where that got us. Then Pierce's eyes caught something over my shoulder, and his expression shifted. He pushed past me into my apartment, which I realized with horror I had left unlocked that morning. When I followed him inside, I saw him standing at my kitchen counter, where I had left several pill bottles that I had forgotten to hide away. He grabbed one and read the label aloud. What the hell is this? Prescription medication? What's wrong with you? I snatched the bottle from his hands, clutching it to my chest. It's none of your business. Bethany had followed us inside, and her face had gone pale. You're sick, and you didn't tell us. Something inside me snapped in that moment. All the fear and isolation and exhaustion of the past 2 years exploded outward in a fury I could not control. Get out! I screamed at them. I don't need your pity or your judgment. Get out of my apartment. I shoved them toward the door with strength I did not know I still possessed. Bethany was crying openly now. We're your family. We're trying to help. I laughed, and the sound was harsh and broken. Family? Family doesn't hire private investigators. Family doesn't plan vacations to celebrate getting rid of someone. The silence that followed was absolute. Pierce's face went slack with shock. Garrett closed his eyes. Bethany whispered, How do you know about the trip? I could see them realizing the truth, putting together the pieces of how I had overheard their planning session at our parents' house. Garrett said quietly, You were at Mom's house. You heard us. Pierce recovered quickly, his defensiveness flaring back to life. You excluded yourself first. You've been pushing us away for 2 years. Bethany backed toward the door, her voice shaking. We're going without you because you clearly don't want us in your life. This is your fault, Mallory. They left in a storm of slammed doors and angry footsteps. I collapsed on my kitchen floor, my back against the cabinets, and I cried until I had nothing left. The secret was still safe, technically. They knew I was taking medication, but they did not know why. They knew I had lost my job, but they did not know the reason. The confrontation had failed to reveal the truth, but it had cost me something precious. Whatever fragile connection still existed between me and my siblings had been stretched to the breaking point, and I had no idea if it could ever be repaired. 2 days before my family was scheduled to depart for their vacation, my parents appeared at my apartment door unannounced. It was early morning, barely past 7, and I answered in my pajamas, with my hair uncombed and my eyes still heavy with exhaustion from another sleepless night. My mother Constance stood with her purse clutched against her stomach like a shield. My father Warren stood behind her with his hands in his pockets and an expression that might have been concern if I did not know better. "Your siblings told us about the fight," Constance said without preamble. "May we come in?" I let them in because I did not have the energy to refuse. My father surveyed my apartment with barely concealed disapproval, taking in the sparse furniture and the drawn curtains, and the general air of neglect that I could no longer hide. Constance sat on my couch without being invited and crossed her ankles primly. "We think family therapy might help," she announced. "When we get back from vacation, we can all sit down with a professional and work through these issues together." Her voice was the practiced tone of someone offering a solution they had already decided was correct. Warren nodded in agreement. "Communication has clearly broken down. We need to address that." But their body language told a different story than their words. They were not here to understand me. They were here to confront me, to deliver a message they had rehearsed together on the drive over. Constance's concern was performative, a show put on for her own benefit rather than mine. And what came next proved that beyond any doubt. "You've always been the dramatic one, Mallory," my mother said, her voice taking on an edge. Warren picked up the thread seamlessly. "Ever since you were little, you needed attention. Remember when you faked sick to skip school in 4th grade? You had us worried for nothing." I remembered that incident differently. I had been genuinely sick with a stomach flu, but my mother had insisted I was faking until I vomited in the school nurse's office and had to be sent home. The story had been rewritten in family legend to cast me as a manipulator, a girl who cried wolf for attention. And now they were using that distorted history against me. "This is the same pattern," Warren continued. "You see that we're happy as a family, and you create problems to make yourself the center of attention." Constance nodded vigorously. "The pills your siblings saw are probably just vitamins. You're playing victim. And we're not going to enable it anymore." Their theory crystallized in front of me like ice forming on a window. They had convinced themselves that I was manufacturing a crisis because I was jealous of my siblings, marriages, and children. They believed I had quit my job and isolated myself as an elaborate performance designed to make them feel guilty. Warren laid out their logic with the confidence of someone who had never questioned his own conclusions. "You're jealous of Bethany's beautiful home and Pierce's successful business. Garrett just had another baby, and you couldn't stand not being the focus anymore. So you created a mystery illness to pull attention back to yourself." I opened my mouth to defend myself, to try to explain that what I was dealing with was real and serious, and not a bid for attention, but Constance cut me off before I could form the words. "If it were serious, you would have told us. That's what family does. We don't keep secrets." The hypocrisy was staggering. They were keeping a $32,000 vacation secret from me, but my privacy was unacceptable. Warren leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. "Family doesn't keep secrets," he repeated, apparently unaware of the irony dripping from every syllable. Then came the weaponization of the vacation itself. Constance reached into her purse and pulled out a glossy travel brochure for the Turks and Caicos resort. She handed it to me with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "This is where well be. Beautiful, isn't it? Maybe seeing what you're missing will motivate you to change." Warren added, "We didn't invite you because we need a break from your negativity. Bethany's kids asked why Aunt Mallory is always sad, and we didn't know what to tell them. We said you're going through a phase." The casual cruelty of their words stole my breath. They had discussed me with children, had told my nieces and nephews that I was sad and unstable and going through a phase like a difficult teenager. Constance stood to leave, but not before pressing a folded piece of paper into my hands. "We made a list of suggestions. Things you could work on while we're gone." I unfolded the paper after they left and read their recommendations with disbelief. "Get a real job. Join a church. Start dating. Smile more. Dress better. Call your mother once a week." Each item was a judgment disguised as advice, a criticism wrapped in the language of concern. At the bottom, in my mother's careful handwriting, was a final note. "We love you, but we don't like who you've become. Please think about that while we're on vacation." I sat alone in my apartment after they left, reading their list over and over again. Everything they had written was about appearance, about how I looked to other people, about maintaining the family image. Nothing addressed actual well-being. Nothing acknowledged that I might be struggling with something real. I realized with painful clarity that my parents had never really known me. Or worse, they had never tried to know me. They had created a version of Mallory in their minds, the dramatic daughter who craved attention, and they had made her real through the sheer force of their belief. The actual me, the one fighting for her life in this bare apartment, did not exist for them at all. The day before my family was scheduled to depart for their vacation, my phone buzzed with a notification from a group chat I had not seen in months. I looked at the screen and realized with a jolt that they had added me back to the family group chat. At first, I thought perhaps it was an olive branch, a last-minute invitation to join them. But when I opened the message, I understood that inclusion was not the purpose at all. The message was from my Aunt Francine, my father's older sister, and it was addressed specifically to me. Mallory, we need to talk about some things before we leave for vacation tomorrow. What followed was not a conversation but a public execution. Aunt Francine had written a lengthy message listing every perceived failure of my adult life. She compared me unfavorably to my successful cousins, naming them one by one like exhibits in a prosecution. Your cousin Braden is married with 3 kids and owns his own business. Your cousin Sloane is a lawyer with a beautiful house and is active in her community. What have you done with your life, Mallory? When are you going to grow up and take responsibility? The words were brutal in their specificity, clearly the result of family gossip sessions that had been happening behind my back for months. Before I could respond, other relatives began piling on. My Uncle Marshall, who I had not spoken to in over a year, wrote, "Your mother cries about you constantly. Do you know how much stress you've caused her?" Aunt Loretta, who I remembered as a kind woman from my childhood, added, "You're breaking your father's heart. He talks about you at every family dinner, wondering where he went wrong." My cousin Jenna, who was only 19 and barely knew me, wrote, "My mom says you're on drugs. Is that true? That's really sad if it's true." The messages kept coming, each one more painful than the last, and I watched them appear on my screen with the helpless horror of someone witnessing a car accident in slow motion. The lies that had been spreading through my extended family became clearer with each message. Pierce and Bethany had apparently shared their theories about my secret life, and the story had morphed as it passed from person to person. By the time it reached my aunts and uncles and cousins, I had been transformed into a cautionary tale. I was an addict, they had decided. I was unemployed and possibly homeless. I was receiving money from unknown sources, probably illegal ones. Aunt Francine announced, "We're staging an intervention when we get back from vacation. This has gone on long enough." I started typing a response, trying to explain that I was not on drugs, that my situation was complicated but not criminal, that I was not the person they had invented in their group discussions. But before I could send my message, more attacks appeared. My grandmother Edith, who I had always thought loved me unconditionally, wrote, "I'm ashamed to tell my friends about you. When they ask about my grandchildren, I change the subject rather than mention your name." Cousin Braden added, "You're setting a bad example for the younger kids. My children used to look up to you, but now I have to explain why Aunt Mallory never comes to anything." The cruelest message came from my Uncle Marshall's wife, Deirdre, a woman I had met perhaps 5 times in my entire life. "Honestly, you not coming on vacation is a relief," she wrote. "No one wanted to deal with your attitude or whatever drama you were going to bring. This trip is about family bonding, and you would have ruined it." Others agreed with laughing emojis and thumbs-up reactions. Bethany sent a message that felt like the final nail in my coffin. "See? It's not just us. Everyone's worried about you." But the messages did not read like worry. They read like condemnation, like a public trial where the verdict had been decided before any evidence was heard. My phone buzzed separately with a private message from Garrett. "I'm sorry," he wrote. "This is wrong. I tried to stop them from adding you to that chat, but they said you needed to see how serious the situation is. Can we talk? Just you and me." I stared at his message for a long time, wanting to believe that at least one person in my family was on my side. But I was too hurt to respond. I was too exhausted to trust. I put my phone down without typing anything back. The photos started appearing within hours. My family had begun documenting their pre-vacation excitement on social media, posting pictures of themselves at the airport, wearing matching t-shirts with a custom design that said, "Family Vacation 2024. The caption on my mother's post read, "Family Vacation." Almost everyone made it. The comments from friends and neighbors began rolling in. "Where's Mallory?" someone asked. My mother's response was visible for everyone to see. She chose not to join us. We're sad about it, but we respect her decision. The lie was so bold that it took my breath away. I had not chosen anything. I had not been invited. But now, in the public record of social media, my absence was being framed as my own choice. Friends from high school started texting me. "Are you okay? Your mom said you're going through something. Just wanted to check in." A neighbor from my childhood street sent a message. "Heard you're having trouble, keeping you in my prayers." Everyone knew now. Everyone had been told the family's version of events. I had been turned into the villain of a story I had never agreed to be part of. I turned off my phone and sat in my dark apartment, trying to understand how this had happened. The vacation was not just about rest and relaxation for my family. It was about unity against me. They were bonding over their shared concern, their shared frustration, their shared decision that I was the problem and they were the solution. My exclusion was not an oversight or a cruel accident. It was the point. I was the villain in their family story, and they were traveling to paradise to celebrate their escape from me. That night, sleep refused to come, no matter how desperately I chased it. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every cruel message, every laughing emoji, every public proclamation that I had chosen to exclude myself. The stress was not just emotional anymore. My body was reacting with symptoms I recognized all too well. My heart raced even though I was lying still. Waves of dizziness washed over me whenever I moved my head. Nausea churned in my stomach, making even the thought of eating impossible. I checked the medical app on my phone that I used to track my vitals, and the numbers made my chest tighten with fear. At 2 a.m, I made a decision that felt like surrender. I pulled on sweatpants and a jacket, grabbed my keys and my medical binder, and drove myself to the hospital. The same hospital where everything had started 2 years ago, where my life had split into a before and after that no one in my family knew about. The emergency room was quiet at that hour, with only a handful of patients scattered across the waiting area. I checked in at the front desk and waited for someone to call my name. A nurse appeared within minutes, a woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her name tag said Dorothy, and when she looked at my face, I saw recognition flash across her features. "You're back," she said, and there was no judgment in her voice, only concern. "How long this time?" I did not answer because I did not know how to explain what was happening. She took my vitals and drew blood and escorted me to an examination room with the efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. Dr. Fletcher arrived 30 minutes later, reviewing my chart on his tablet with an expression that grew more serious with each screen. He was the same doctor who had diagnosed me 2 years ago, who had walked me through treatment options and side effects and statistics that I had memorized against my will. "Your levels are concerning," he said, without sugarcoating. "Your counts are lower than last month, and your inflammatory markers are elevated. We need to talk about the next round of treatment." He paused and looked at me with something like sadness. "Does your family still not know?" I shook my head, and the motion made my vision swim. Dr. Fletcher sighed and sat down on the rolling stool across from me. "Mallory, we've talked about this before. The stress you're under is dangerous. You can't keep handling this alone. Your body needs rest, and your mind needs support. Isolation is not a treatment plan." He gestured toward my phone, which was turned off in my purse. The psychological component of chronic illness is just as important as the physical. You need people. The breakdown came without warning. Tears spilled down my cheeks, and I could not stop them no matter how hard I tried. I told Nurse Dorothy and Dr. Fletcher about the vacation I had been excluded from, about the group chat attacks, about my parents' list of suggestions and my siblings' accusations. Dorothy's face flushed with anger on my behalf. "They don't know you're sick," she demanded. "They hired a private investigator instead of just talking to you, and they still don't know." Dr. Fletcher shook his head slowly. "This level of stress is actively harming your recovery. You need support, especially for what's coming next. I understood what he meant, and the understanding sat heavy in my chest. The reason I had kept my diagnosis secret from my family was complicated, rooted in a moment 2 years ago that I had never been able to forget. I had been visiting my parents' house, just a normal Sunday dinner, when I overheard my mother and father discussing a friend's daughter who had recently been diagnosed with a serious autoimmune condition. My mother's voice had carried clearly from the kitchen. Thank God none of our children have something like that. I don't know what I would do if one of them got sick that way. My father agreed without hesitation. I couldn't handle watching them suffer. I'm not strong enough for that. In that moment, standing outside the kitchen door, much as I would stand 2 years later, I had made a decision that would shape everything that followed. They could not handle it. They had said so themselves. So I would never make them try. I would carry this burden alone, protecting them from the suffering they could not bear to witness. The diagnosis came 3 months later, a name for the symptoms that had been building for years. Lupus. Systemic lupus erythematosus. An autoimmune disease where my body attacked itself, requiring chemotherapy medications and immunosuppressants and regular hospital visits to manage. I remembered other moments that had reinforced my decision to stay silent. Bethany once mentioned a colleague who took extended medical leave, calling her selfish for burdening the team with her absence. Pierce complained about a friend who talked too much about his chronic illness, saying it was exhausting to be around someone who could not stop focusing on their problems. My family valued strength and self-sufficiency above all else. Illness was weakness. Asking for help was failure. I could not be the daughter who failed. Dr. Fletcher admitted me overnight for observation, stabilizing my condition with medication and fluids while I lay in a hospital bed checking my family's vacation photos on the phone I had finally turned back on. They had arrived at the resort. They were smiling on the beach with drinks in their hands. My mother had posted a new caption. Perfect family, perfect trip. The exclamation point felt like a knife twisting in my chest. But something else was growing inside me alongside the pain. For the first time in 2 years, I felt the stirring of anger. They called me selfish while sipping cocktails in the Caribbean. They judged my isolation while celebrating my absence. I had been protecting them, sacrificing myself to shield them from discomfort, and they had made me their enemy in return. I picked up my phone and sent a text to Garrett. 3 words that would change everything. I'm in the hospital. He called immediately, his voice panicked. What's wrong? What's happening? Are you okay? I told him not to tell anyone else in the family. I made him promise. But I also told him the truth. Finally, after 2 years of hiding, when they get back from vacation, I'm going to tell everyone everything. They want the truth? They're going to get it. Garrett could not stay at the resort after receiving my text. He told me later that he spent 2 hours trying to enjoy the pool and the beach and the family activities, but my words kept echoing in his mind. His sister was in the hospital. His sister, who everyone had decided was the problem, who they had excluded and judged and investigated, was alone in a hospital bed while they drank cocktails and took family photos. He told his wife Celeste that he had a work emergency and needed to fly home. She agreed to stay with their kids, understanding without being told that something serious was happening. He booked the first available flight and was back in Connecticut by the next afternoon. He found me still in the hospital, sitting up in bed with my medical binder open beside me and an IV line running into my arm. The look on his face when he walked through the door was something I will never forget. He looked terrified and confused and devastated all at once. I told you not to come, I said, but there was no real anger in my voice. I was too tired for anger. He pulled a chair beside my bed and sat down heavily. I couldn't stay there knowing you were here. I couldn't pretend everything was fine. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Garrett asked the questions that had been building for 2 years. What's actually wrong with you? Why have you been hiding? What are those pills Pierce saw in your apartment? He was leaning forward, his eyes searching my face for answers I had withheld for so long. I looked at him, my younger brother who had always tried to reach out even when I pushed him away, and I made a decision. My defenses were down. I was exhausted beyond pretending. It was time to tell someone the truth. I was diagnosed with lupus 2 years ago, I said, and the words felt strange in my mouth after so long holding them back. Systemic lupus erythematosus. It's an autoimmune disease where my body attacks itself. I've been on chemotherapy medications and immunosuppressants ever since. I watched his face as the information landed, watched understanding replace confusion. I lost my job because I couldn't maintain a consistent schedule between hospital appointments and symptom flares. The medical bills have been eating through my savings. The pills Pierce found are the medications keeping me alive. Garrett was silent for so long that I thought he might get up and leave. But when he finally spoke, his voice was shaking. "You've been going through this alone?" "For 2 years." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak without crying. He stood up suddenly and paced to the window, running his hands through his hair. "Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you tell anyone?" I told him about the conversation I had overheard 2 years ago, my parents saying they could not handle watching one of their children suffer. I told him about Bethany's comments about sick people being burdens. I told him about Pierce's complaints about friends who talked about their illnesses. I didn't want pity, I said. I didn't want judgment. I didn't want to become the family failure story. He turned back to me with tears in his eyes. "You thought we would judge you for being sick." The pain in his voice was genuine, and it broke something open in my chest. "Not just judge me," I said. "Abandon me. Treat me like a burden. Exactly what happened with the vacation, Garrett. I didn't even tell them, and they still excluded me because I was too difficult to deal with. What do you think would have happened if they knew I had cancer drugs in my medicine cabinet?" I told him more details then, things I had never said out loud to anyone except my doctors. I told him about the days when I was too weak to leave my apartment, when I lay in bed listening to my body fight against itself. I told him about the meal replacement shakes because cooking exhausted me. I told him about the curtains I kept drawn because light sensitivity was a symptom I could not escape. I told him about the remote job because I never knew when a flare would strike and leave me bedridden. I showed him the thickness of my medical binder, filled with lab results and treatment plans and medication schedules. Garrett sat back down and took my hand. "I'm telling them when they get back. All of them. They need to know." I shook my head immediately. "They'll make it about themselves. Mom will cry about how could you not tell us. Dad will lecture me about family communication. Bethany will say I should have tried harder. Pierce will find a way to be offended." Garrett squeezed my hand. "Let them. You've been carrying this alone for too long. You need help, Mallory. Real help, not just doctors but family." I laughed bitterly. "The family that planned a vacation without me? You think they want to deal with this?" But Garrett was insistent. He convinced me to leave the hospital when I was discharged and come stay with him and Celeste in their guest house. "You're not going back to that apartment alone," he said. "Not anymore." He called Celeste and explained everything, and her response was immediate and welcoming. "She should have been with us all along," she said. "The guest house is ready whenever she wants it." As we left the hospital, Nurse Dorothy hugged me at the door. "About time someone's taking care of you," she said. Garrett saw my medical file in my hands, saw the thickness of it, the weight of 2 years of alone struggle documented in page after page. "How did you survive this alone?" he asked as we walked to his car. I did not have a good answer. "I didn't have a choice," I said. And that was the truest thing I had said in 2 years. 5 days later, the rest of my family returned from Turks and Caicos with sun-kissed skin and relaxed smiles and hundreds of photos to share. Their group chat was full of memories from the trip, inside jokes and beautiful sunsets and children playing on the beach. They had bonded during their time away, becoming closer as a unit while the problem of Mallory waited for them back home. But they did not know what was waiting. They did not know that everything was about to change. My mother insisted on a family dinner at my parents' house the evening after they returned. "Everyone needs to come," she announced in the group chat that I had been added back to sometime during the trip. "We have so many photos to share and stories to tell." She added a separate message that I knew was directed at me. "We hope everyone can make it this time." The passive aggression was subtle but unmistakable. I showed the message to Garrett, who was sitting across from me at his kitchen table. "Tonight," he said. "We tell them tonight." I was terrified, but I agreed. There was no point in hiding anymore. Garrett and I arrived together at my parents' house that evening, and our joint entrance drew immediate attention. Bethany's eyebrows rose. You two came together. Pierce exchanged a look with his wife that I could not read. Our parents were setting the table, and they paused when they saw us. The tension in the room was immediate and palpable. I could feel everyone watching me, waiting for me to do something wrong, waiting to confirm whatever narrative they had constructed in my absence. Dinner began tensely. My mother passed around her iPad with vacation photos, narrating each image with enthusiasm that felt pointed. This was the first day at the resort. Look how beautiful it was. So peaceful. My father added, everyone got along perfectly. It was exactly what we needed as a family. Bethany showed pictures of her children building sandcastles and swimming in the pool. They asked about you, she said to me, but her tone suggested this was an accusation rather than a statement of fact. Pierce did not speak to me directly at all, but I heard him mutter to his wife, at least she showed up this time. The children at the table watched the adult dynamics with confused expressions, sensing that something was wrong without understanding what. Constance smiled at me with her public performance smile. Mallory, you're so quiet, everything okay? Warren answered before I could speak. She's always quiet now. We're used to it. Bethany laughed without humor. At least she showed up this time. The comments were small but constant, little cuts designed to remind me of my failure to be present, my choice to exclude myself from their perfect family vacation. No one mentioned that I had not been invited. The rewriting of history was complete. Then Garrett stood up. He picked up his water glass and tapped it with his fork, the way people do at weddings when they want to make a toast. But this was not a toast. We need to talk, he said, and his voice was firm in a way I had never heard from my quiet younger brother, as a family. About something important. Pierce groaned audibly. Here we go. Can't we have one dinner without drama? Garrett ignored him. No, everyone needs to listen. Including you, Mom and Dad. Constance tried to deflect with practiced skill. Garrett, we just got back. Can't whatever this is wait? We're supposed to be celebrating. Bethany nodded emphatically. Is this about Mallory again? We're tired of making everything about her problems. Garrett's response shocked everyone at the table. Shut up and listen. He had never raised his voice to anyone in his life. The children went silent. The adults stared. Our mother's mouth fell open in surprise. Mallory's been sick, Garrett said into the stunned silence. Really sick. For 2 years. The words landed like bombs, detonating the comfortable assumptions that everyone had built. Pierce was the first to recover. Sick how? His voice was skeptical, already preparing to dismiss whatever came next. I spoke for the first time since sitting down, my voice quiet but steady. I have lupus. The silence that followed was unlike anything I had experienced. It was not the silence of shock or even disbelief. It was the silence of a narrative crumbling, of a story being rewritten in real time. Garrett filled in the details when I could not continue. He explained the diagnosis, the treatment, the struggle I had been managing alone for 24 months, while they debated whether I was on drugs or gambling or simply being dramatic for attention. He showed them the hospital discharge papers I had brought, the medication bottles, the medical binder that documented everything. My father's voice was hoarse when he finally spoke. Why didn't you tell us? I answered his question with a question of my own. Because I heard you, 2 years ago, talking about sick people being burdens. Constance's face went pale. We never said that. I corrected her with specific details. You were talking about the Henderson's daughter. You said, thank God none of our children have something like that. You said you couldn't handle watching us suffer. The memory was clear in my mind, preserved with painful clarity. And Bethany, you called sick people selfish burdens. You said taking medical leave was inconsiderate to everyone else. Bethany's defensive response came immediately. I was talking about someone who was faking for attention. I looked at her steadily. How would you know if I was faking or not? You never asked. None of you asked. You hired a private investigator instead of having a conversation with your own sister. Pierce tried to redirect the blame. You pushed us away. You stopped coming to family events. I felt the anger I had been suppressing for years finally break the surface. Because I was terrified of exactly this reaction. I was terrified that you would judge me, reject me, treat me like a burden. And look what happened. You didn't even know I was sick, and you still excluded me from a family vacation because I was too much trouble. Garrett revealed the final piece of information that I had asked him to keep until this moment. She was hospitalized while you were on vacation, he said, and his voice was cold with an anger I had never heard from him before. Stress-induced flare. Because you excluded her and let the family attack her in that group chat. He pulled out his phone and read the cruel messages aloud. Aunt Francine's list of my failures, Uncle Marshall's guilt trips, Grandmother Edith's shame, Cousin Braden's judgment, the laughing emojis agreeing that my absence was a relief. With each message, I watched my family's faces change, watched the defensive anger slowly transform into something that might have been shame. My mother started crying, and her tears looked genuine for perhaps the first time in this entire ordeal. "We didn't know," she kept repeating. "We didn't know." My father's voice was thick with emotion. "Why didn't you trust us?" I answered him with the truth that had been building in my chest for years. "Because you spent $32,000 on a vacation without me and called it natural consequences. You told your friends I chose not to come. You let the entire extended family believe I was a drug addict rather than just asking me what was wrong. How could I trust you with something this big when you couldn't even handle my need for privacy?" Bethany tried again to deflect. "You still should have told us." But I was done accepting blame for the choices my family had made. Why? So you could stage an intervention like Aunt Francine suggested? So you could treat me like a problem to fix instead of a person to support? Pierce fell back on his familiar defense. "We thought you were on drugs." I laughed, and the sound was harsh and broken. "I am on drugs. Chemotherapy, immunosuppressants, medications that cost $3,000 a month just to keep me alive." The financial revelation created another wave of shock around the table. Warren asked weakly. $3,000. I nodded. "I lost my job. I've been burning through my savings. I'm barely surviving." Constance reached for me across the table. "Why didn't you ask for help?" I pulled away from her hand. "You planned a vacation without me. You called me dramatic. You let the family call me a failure. When exactly was I supposed to ask for help?" Between the group chat attacks and the private investigator, Garrett delivered the final blow by showing them a photo he had taken at the hospital. Me, lying in the hospital bed, looking devastated and alone. "This was taken while you were posting pictures of drinks on the beach," he said. The image passed from hand to hand around the table, and I watched each person's face as they looked at the evidence of what their exclusion had caused. The vacation photos on my mother's iPad felt obscene now. Images of happiness built on my suffering. The immediate aftermath of my revelation was chaotic and painful in ways I had anticipated, and ways I had not expected at all. My mother tried to hug me, reaching across the table with tears streaming down her face, but I pulled away. "Don't. Not yet." The rejection hurt her visibly, but I could not accept comfort from someone who had caused so much pain. My father attempted apologies, stumbling over words that felt inadequate to the situation. "We made a terrible mistake," he said. I corrected him immediately. Multiple terrible mistakes. Over 2 years. I listed everything they had done while claiming to love me. The vacation exclusion, the group chat attacks, the gossips spread through the extended family, the assumptions of drugs and gambling and attention-seeking behavior, the private investigator hired to spy on me rather than simply asking what was wrong. "You didn't give me the benefit of the doubt," I said. "You assumed the worst. You created a story where I was the villain, and you never once considered that I might be the victim." Bethany was crying now, her mascara running in dark streaks down her cheeks. "We were worried about you." I shook my head. Worried people ask questions, they have conversations, they offer support. They don't attack someone in a group chat and call her absence a relief. Garrett stood beside me throughout the confrontation, supporting me in a way that no one else in my family had done for years. "You all made her feel like a burden before she even told you," he said. "You created an environment where being sick meant being weak. You taught us to value image over substance." He pointed at our parents. "This started with you. The way you talk about illness, about vulnerability, about asking for help. We learned to judge, instead of support, because that's what you modeled." My father's admission surprised me with its honesty. "I was afraid of illness," Warren said quietly. "My father died slowly and painfully when I was young. I couldn't face the possibility of watching one of my children go through something like that. Constance nodded. I didn't want to face the possibility of losing you. It was easier to pretend nothing was wrong. I understood what they were saying, but understanding did not equal forgiveness. So you pushed me away first, made it easier in case I disappeared. Neither of them denied it. My siblings had their own reckonings to face. Bethany admitted that she had been so focused on maintaining her image of a perfect family that she had become blind to real problems happening in front of her. Pierce acknowledged that he had assumed I was rejecting the family rather than considering that I might be protecting myself. Both of them apologized, and while the apologies felt thin compared to the weight of their actions, they were at least a beginning. I told them what I needed going forward. I don't need pity. I need family who can handle reality. I listed the practical things that would actually help. Rides to appointments, help with insurance paperwork, someone to call on bad days. Can you do that without making me feel like a burden? Without turning my illness into your tragedy? The promises that followed were tentative but specific. Warren offered to help with medical bills, though I made clear I would not accept money given out of guilt. Constance promised to stop gossiping about me to friends and extended family. Garrett announced that he was moving me into his guest house temporarily, so I would not be alone anymore. His wife Celeste, who had arrived late to the dinner, agreed immediately. Pierce suggested rotating responsibility among the siblings so that no one person carried too much of the load. For the first time in years, my family was problem-solving together with me rather than around me. I set conditions for accepting their help. No telling everyone in town about my diagnosis. This is my private health information. My parents agreed. No treating me like I'm fragile. I'm sick, not broken. My siblings agreed. And no more excluding me from family events, even if I can't always make it. That agreement came with genuine shame from everyone who had planned the vacation without me. We created a schedule together that night, working out who would drive me to appointments and when, who would help with meal delivery on bad days, who would handle the insurance phone calls that exhausted me. They created a private family chat just for coordinating my care, a direct contrast to the group chat that had been used to attack me. My grandmother Edith arrived near the end of the evening, having heard from someone that a family meeting was happening without her. She walked into the room with the authority of a woman who had survived much and learned from it. "What's all this about?" she demanded. When the situation was explained to her, she walked straight to me and pulled me into a fierce hug. "Foolish girl," she said, but her voice was gentle. "We Caldwells are tougher than we look. You should have told us." She turned to my parents with disapproval. "And you should have created a family where she could." Edith shared her own story then, one I had never heard. She had survived cancer twice in her life. The first time, she kept it secret from everyone, handling treatment alone because she was ashamed and afraid. The second time, she let her family help, and it made all the difference in her recovery. "Strength includes asking for help," she told us. "Real strength means being vulnerable with the people who love you." A week later, I moved into Garrett's guest house. The space was small but warm, filled with touches that Celeste had added to make me feel welcome. My first family dinner after the revelation had a different energy than any gathering I could remember. The tension was still present, but so was something new. Genuine care, easier laughter. My nieces and nephews had made get-well cards with crayons and glitter, their innocent artwork covering my refrigerator. Bethany arrived with a medical binder she had organized to track my appointments and medications. Pierce had researched disability benefits and printed out information for me to review. The first medical appointment after my revelation was attended by both of my parents. They walked into Dr. Fletcher's office with me, and I watched the surprise on his face when he saw that I had not come alone. "You brought support," he said, and his relief was evident. My parents sat through the difficult conversation that followed, hearing the full scope of my illness and the treatment plan ahead. Warren held my hand when the news was hard. Constance asked intelligent questions about side effects and long-term prognosis. They stayed strong for me in a way I had not believed they could. The healing was not instant or complete. I still had hard days when symptoms flared and hope faded. But now, when those days came, I texted the family group chat with simple words. "Bad day. Need quiet." The responses that came back were consistent and loving. "We love you. Here if you need anything." sending strength. Not pity, just presence. Bethany brought groceries every week without making it dramatic. Pierce managed my medical bill tracking system with the same efficiency he applied to his business. Garrett checked in daily, sometimes with phone calls, and sometimes just with text messages, letting me know he was thinking of me. My parents were learning to support without smothering, to ask questions without judgment, to be present without taking over. It was not perfect, but it was real. I sat at a family gathering months later and realized something that made my throat tighten with emotion. I was happy to be there. Genuinely happy. My mother caught my eye across the room and mouthed, "I love you." I mouthed back, "I know." The exchange was simple but profound, a bridge built across the chasm that had separated us for so long. The lessons my family learned through this experience were painful but necessary. We are not defined by perfection. We are defined by showing up when things are hard. Everyone carries invisible battles that we cannot see from the outside. Judgment isolates people. Compassion connects them. Strength is not the absence of vulnerability, but the courage to be vulnerable with people who matter. My phone buzzed with a reminder about my treatment the next day. An appointment that used to fill me with dread now felt manageable because I knew Garrett would be driving me, my parents would bring lunch afterward, and Bethany would pick up my prescriptions. I breathed easier than I had in years. I was still sick. That had not changed. But I was not alone anymore, and that made all the difference. I looked at my family laughing together around the room, imperfect people who had hurt me deeply and were now trying to make amends. I thought about everything I had learned through this painful journey. People fear what they do not understand, and my family had been afraid. The vacation without me had been their way of avoiding a problem they did not know how to face. But now, they were facing it. We were facing it together. Life taught me that families can break and heal, sometimes in the same breath. My parents invited everyone on vacation except me, and that exclusion nearly destroyed our relationship forever. But learning my secret, understanding what I had been carrying alone, gave them the opportunity to become the family I had always needed. They are choosing to walk this journey with me now, not because it is easy, but because they finally understand that love requires effort, presence, and the willingness to show up even when things are difficult. Before I finish this story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt invisible to the people who should love you most? Have you ever carried a secret because you were afraid of how others would react? Let me know in the comments below. Your stories matter to me, and I read every single one. If this story touched you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that they are not alone. Subscribe to this channel so you do not miss any of my future stories about family, healing, and the power of truth. And remember, no matter what you are going through, there are people who want to support you. Sometimes you just have to give them the chance. Thank you for watching until the end. I am so grateful for each and every one of you who takes the time to listen to these stories. May you find the courage to share your own burdens with people who love you, and may you find family, whether by blood or by choice, who show up when it matters most. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next story.